on the way back from Mexico, Bruce said, "This is it, I'm out of here." And I didn't know it until then that he was leaving Cooper and starting Bruce McLaren Motor Racing with Teddy. I guess he and Teddy had a discussion after Timmy was killed.
Teddy Meyer,
that they were going to continue. And so we split, although we only lived probably, quarter of a mile apart. I mean, I lived in a couple of houses, depends where you were and which week you were in, who you shared a house with. But I mean, there was Halewood, Revson, Chris Amon, Wally Wilmot, Tyler, Howden Ganley. We all lived in these two big houses. And Bruce.
This is when you're in your mid-20s?
Well, 41, this would be 64, 5, 6, I'd be 23, 24.
Okay, so yeah, young man's lifestyle, footloose, fancy-free, and traveling house to house.
And in those days, Halewood was king of the hill on motorbikes. And in 1963, we all went up to Mallory Park. It was the 1,000 Guineas, and Mike was he was gone. He had an MV Augusta MV4, the first of the four-cylinder MVs, won the race, and it was all over. So after the event, we go to the Steering Wheel Club in Hinckley in Leicestershire, had a very nice meal, a couple of drinks, and in those days you could ride to the racetrack with one guy and go home with somebody else, because we're all going to the same place. And anyway, I was riding home with a guy named Eric Elsley, and we were on the motorway, and in those days there was no speed limit, and we were pressing on, and there were two trucks in the slow distance, and a faster car came up behind us. So Eric moved to the center lane to let the fast car go by, just as the truck in the slow lane pulled to the middle lane, and we went underneath it. And I spent the next 2 or 3 months in hospital with broken pelvis, leg, ribs, arm, head. Thankfully, thank the Lord, I'm still here today. But anyway, as I say, Bruce lived about a quarter of a mile away with Pat. They were married then. And Denny lived in St. George's Hill. He was just up the road another mile or two. So it was like one little...
Denny home?
Yeah, it was like a little racing community there. And one day it was the end of 60... you like this bit. At the end, after Mexico in 65, I got back to Cooper's, and Roy said, "Roger, you're going to be working with this new guy." I said, "Oh, okay." So he introduced me to this new guy, and he said, "You're going to be putting the new Maserati engine." We'd built a frame in, it was early 65. We built a chassis, a Cooper chassis, tube frame, to take the new 1.5 liter flat 16 Coventry Climax, which never ran in a car. It ran a lot on the dyno, but never got put in a car. And at the end of 65, the FIA in their infinite wisdom changed from 1.5 liter to 3 liter. And Cooper couldn't get an engine, and the last thing they got was the Type 63 Maserati engine. And this guy I introduced to was a guy named Ron Dennis, who you probably know quite well. And Ron and I put the first Maserati engine in the first ever Cooper chassis in 1965. And it was while I was working on that project that Chris said one day, he said, "Hey, Rod, Bruce and I are going to be driving for Ford at Le Mans next year. Why don't you go across the road?" Because in those days, Cooper Cars and Allen Man Racing, we were all in the...
it was the same community.
Same community. I mean, you could see one from the other. So I went across to talk to Allen Man. He said, "When do you want to start?" And I thought, Bruce had gone, and I didn't know who was coming to Cooper's. And going back to the grid at Watkins Glen that Kurt showed me, he said, "Where's the rest of the crew?" I said, "You're looking at it." In those days, there was one driver, one mechanic, yes, and a team manager. There was 5 of us did the 2 races here in Mexico. And so I thought, this might be an opportunity. So I went across to Alaman, and he said, "When do you want to start?"